the 22nd entry in our continuing series of the best movie you've never seen, Clint Eastwood's Heartbreak Ridge.
Sergeant Tom Gunny Highway, Congressional Medal of Honor winner, over 30 years in the Marine Corps. His battles never end.
I think war's just been declared. Why don't you just...
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday early morning, afternoon with me here in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Now, I had a little bit of a problem because I knew what movie I wanted to talk about today. Some people would consider this one a guilty pleasure. I don't. I think it's a terrific film. And others would say, too many people have seen this for you to classify it as the best movie you've never seen. So we're going to do a little bit of a combo hybrid episode. I'm going to, you know what they say, do both, be both. We're going to cross-reference, cross-index this episode as one of the best movies you've never seen, and it's also a bit of a guilty pleasure movie. The film in question is Clint Eastwood's 1986 character study / action / war movie, Heartbreak Ridge. Now, Heartbreak Ridge came along at a time where Clint Eastwood was starting to do different things, and he became more interested in aging and representation of aging and the concepts of people being outmoded, outgrowing certain jobs, outgrowing careers. And if you want to throw in automation, this could easily apply to a lot of different things other than just a career military man who is nearing the end of his career, whether he wants to be at the end of his career or not. In the long, illustrious career of Clint Eastwood, his portrayal in this particular film of Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Highway, it's one of his best film performances. Even if the movie is not 100% successful all the time, I think for a movie well over 2 hours, it's incredibly entertaining. And it tells a really compelling, interesting story, even if there are certain narrative elements that you could have done without. The movie could have been 20 minutes shorter, and it would have been a different movie. It would have been more focused on the action elements. But Clint wanted to tell a more well-rounded, fully rounded story of this very flawed man who nevertheless had and has his heart in the right place. And it is not a stretch to say he's a patriot. He is somebody who has spilled blood on enemy soil and on foreign soil in the name of the United States of America. And the movie is set at the time in which it was made. It's set in the mid-1980s. It's the only film that Clint made while serving a 2-year term as mayor of his adopted hometown of Carmel, California. And he was able to work things out where he could shoot the movie. I think the main filming location was less than 10 miles from his office, where he really did serve as mayor. Clint Eastwood really sat in a mayor office and a mayor's desk, and he dealt with bureaucratic fuckery, which he was used to in the movie business, but he hated politics. He okay talking about it, but he hated actually the job of being mayor, the bureaucratic, the red tape, the nonsense. And he ran for mayor because the city of Carmel, as much as he loved it, and he had already made his home there for more than 15 years, closer to 2 decades, there were a lot of local ordinances that were, I'm going to tell you some of them, and you're going to say, that's bullshit, that couldn't be right. There were no stores on the streets of Carmel that sold ice cream. There was an ordinance passed against the consumption of ice cream in the public sphere. Women were only allowed to wear heels up to a certain height, 2 inches. These are the kinds of absurd rules and regulations Carmel by the Sea had. So Clint ran as a nonpartisan, and he He was a pretty good mayor. He was very popular, and not just because he was Clint Eastwood. He got rid of a lot of that nonsense. But he hated the stupid stuff. Being involved in zoning disputes with his neighbors, where one guy wants to build a deck on his own property, and Clint's other neighbor says, "It's not code, Mayor Eastwood. He wants to build it an inch higher than code." And there's Clint Eastwood on a stepladder sometime in 1985 at 6 o'clock on a Friday with his measuring tape, figuring out if neighbor A can build the deck the way he wants to, or if neighbor B is correct and you can't do it this way because it's not code. That's what put him off politics. Because he certainly was young enough, if he wanted to follow in the footsteps of Ronald Reagan and try for governor of California, or if he wanted to be Arnold, the governor. Before Arnold became the governor, by how many decades? 17 years? He could have done that, but no. No, thank you. I'm all set here. I've had enough of politics. Heartbreak Ridge, the one movie that he made while serving as mayor. So in this film, we meet Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Highway. At the very beginning, he's in what amounts to a drunk tank. He is somebody who is a functional alcoholic. I think we're allowed to say that. His character is presented as a functional alcoholic. Even when he is sauced, he is lethal. If anything, he is more dangerous because whatever edit function he has that keeps him from beating the shit out of every person who steps in his path, when he's drunk, he has even less control over that. Tom Highway comes across like a ticking time bomb. He is a wreck of a man, but he is a massively decorated wartime soldier. And this is why there are characters in this film that have more patience with him, and there are people you don't expect to be antagonistic who are, and then there are those who should be antagonistic but aren't because they know his record. And there is something, and it's also because it's Clint Eastwood. It gives you pause. As much as you want to rip on this guy, we know what he did. He went into a situation in Vietnam that was an unwinnable situation, and only he and one other guy came out alive. He was a great soldier. He just sucked at life. And Clint manages to get so much narrative information across while saying very little. And a terrific actress that he was a big fan of and hired her to play his ex-wife in this film, Marsha Mason, a 4-time Oscar nominee herself. She does a lot of the heavy lifting as far as the thespian goes. And we learn about him and what a shitty husband he probably was, but also how much she loved him, how much she put up with. Again, cliche, but the way Marsha Mason plays this character, it's not a thankless role. She gets to do some real emoting, and it doesn't feel like an actress trying to get another Oscar nomination. She comes across as if she believably could be Gunnery Sergeant Tom Highway's ex-wife. She still loves him. They're probably done permanently. There are other guys in her midst. She still loves him. As much as she probably wished that she would never have to deal with him again, there is something still between the two of them. Now, I believe Clint was playing a little bit older in this movie than he was. He was 54, 55 during filming. I think his character of Highway is supposed to be closer to 60. But there are moments where Clint, although the hair is short, guy looked fucking dynamite. And there are people who look their age in their mid-50s, but look great. It's not like, and we've obviously seen people in their mid-50s where he said, this guy looks like he's 80. But I think Clint was supposed to be playing a little bit older. So he is a Marine. He's not in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force. He's a Marine. And he began his military career with a particular platoon called, well, reconnaissance, but it's just informally known as recon. And he's coming to the end of the line. He returns to where he started his career, and they are tasking him with transforming this very slacking reconnaissance platoon into an elite fighting force. And the thing is, we can make jokes, and there are certain cliches, but the movie takes the military very seriously. And when I say something like he's tasked with whipping them into fighting shape, that's really what he's there to do. He's not there to be their friend. He's not there to screw around. And we get the idea that the soldiers in the reconnaissance platoon have a lot of potential. They're a very intelligent, super athletic, and motivated young men. And then there are some that are slackers. But they clearly have the potential to not just sit around all day shooting pool because their previous CO was a twerp. So you have some really terrific actors in this film in supporting roles, such as Bruce McGill, who plays a kind of antagonistic force in the film, even though the guys are on the same side. They're both United States Marines. But his character, McGill's character, thinks Highway should not be in the military anymore. Break glass only in event of war. This guy's a fucking wreck. He's just going to keep fucking up, and he's going to screw up what I'm trying to do here. So it's personal, but he has professional reasons that make sense. And it's a little bit like in The Line of Fire a number of years later, where Clint plays a Secret Service agent who also is more or less outmoded. He's too old for presidential detail, but he manages to get himself back on presidential detail because one of the ranking members of the Secret Service has his back and pulls strings for him. But the Gary Cole character, love Gary Cole, the Gary Cole character in The Line of Fire, in that case, it really isn't personal. But from a professional standpoint, even if he may not like Clint's character in that movie, it's not personal. If he said, no, this guy's an asshole, I don't like him, but he can do the job. He does not think he can do the job. In Heartbreak Ridge, of presidential detail in The Line of Fire, in Heartbreak Ridge, is it Major Powers is the character Bruce McGill plays. I'm sorry, it's Everett McGill. I get my McGills mixed up. There's Bruce McGill and Everett McGill. So we'll just say McGill, right? But the character of Major Powers, that's the character I'm talking about. He knows that Gunnery Sergeant Tom Highway can do the job. He just doesn't want him there. He sees him as a negative influence. Not that he's a slacker, he's a drunk. He's going to get into a fight at the wrong time. He's going to lead his men into platoon. He could be hung up into combat. It's bad. I don't want him here. So he tries to get him out. But he's limited. He doesn't have unlimited capacity to hire and fire. And we saw this too in Top Gun Maverick. The number of times people try to get rid of Pete Mitchell, despite the fact that he is an unbelievably capable pilot. He is a patriot and he has unbelievable levels of courage. We need him out of here. He's reckless, he doesn't follow orders, he nearly crashed a plane, whatever it might be. But Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Highway, through a mixture of tough love and compassion. Now, he's not the warmest, fuzziest guy, but he also isn't somebody who is busting the balls of the recruits, of the recon platoon, just for the sake of being a tough guy. He takes his job seriously. He doesn't know where he's going to go or what he's going to do when his time is up. Because the reality is, he has a lot more life to live. He's not an old man. He can retire if he wants to open a bar in Bermuda or go anywhere in the world, he can. He's not somebody who has spent his money foolishly. But he doesn't know what he's going to do. What he knows he wants to do in the present is transform this slacking recon platoon into something that he can be proud of as a career military man. And the movie is made up of numerous memorable scenes. And there is some fan service as far as we understand what Clint Eastwood already was at this point in his career. He was more than 20 years a star and more than 15 years a superstar. The biggest star in the world for many years. And I don't really know how they kind of classified that, because there were years that Burt Reynolds was the biggest star. But see, that Burt Reynolds was different. You could argue Burt Reynolds, yeah, better actor, more range than Clint Eastwood. Burt Reynolds was in a number of huge hit movies. Most of Clint's films turned a big profit. Burt had movies that were more boffo box office. And Clint also had a lot of big box office hits. But then he had movies which were interesting choices, such as The Gauntlet, such as The Eiger Sanction in the mid-'70s, that were not altogether successful, but still turned a profit because he had a hardcore of fans that would go to films like The Eiger Sanction that in lesser hands, and if it was just an ordinary kind of star, if it's Roy Scheider in The Eiger Sanction, film's not turning a profit because it didn't really get great reviews. It's a spy thriller that's not really a spy thriller. It's a spy thriller in the guise of a mountain climbing film. Heartbreak Ridge has these scenes that we remember. And Mario Van Peebles, it was his big break. And Mario, a terrific filmmaker himself, his father, Melvin Van Peebles, one of the pioneers and forerunners of American independent film in the 60s and 70s. He was a major player and a galvanizing force. And Mario, in his own right, a really solid filmmaker. Films like New Jack City, very, very talented. I mean, New Jack City is a hugely underseen and underrated film, even though it did make money at the time. But it's a bit of a product of its time. It's early 1990s. And New York City, man, looks so good in that film. It brings a tear to the eye, but the city looks gorgeous. But Mario Van Peebles in this film gives a kind of out-of-nowhere electric supporting performance that Clint Eastwood, as filmmaker, it can't be a coincidence that he managed to get this kind of performance out of a lot of different people that you didn't necessarily go in thinking this is going to be awards worthy. Jessica Walter in Play Misty for me, Clint's directorial debut in 1971. She was an actress that some people knew. She plays the mother on the TV show with Jason Bateman, Arrested Development, I'm sorry. She was the mom on that show. So Jessica Walter came out of nowhere and gave a performance which very easily could have gotten her a Best Supporting Actress, not just nomination, but win. Remember Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction? Jessica Walter did it 15 years earlier. And somehow, despite the fact that her character is as fucking batshit insane as Alex Forrest in Fatal Attraction, she still manages to maintain sympathy to a greater extent because her character kind of makes more sense. Kind of makes more sense. But that was an incredible supporting performance that Clint got out of somebody that you didn't necessarily expect. And you go ahead to Heartbreak Ridge, and you have Mario Van Peebles, a total wild card, coming out of nowhere and dominating scenes where Clint Eastwood is the only other person in the scene. And when I tell you, in Clint's entire career, especially as a leading man, to make him disappear in a scene is virtually not something that happens. Mario Van Peebles, as Stitch Jones, is able to do it. And once again, to his credit, Clint realized he had a live wire, an enormous talent in Mario Van Peebles, and he gave him the room. He didn't tell him to tone down the shtick. He hired him because he was this kind of a character, that he was a big personality. I think it was that he was friends with his dad. That's probably how he got the part, but he earned the part. And Mario is fantastic in this film. The movie essentially builds to a real-life historical event, which, strangely enough, one of my friends, who also was a Marine, ended up taking part in. It was a U.S. incursion into Grenada when a number of students were in danger from hostile forces. And we went in there, and our people kind of quelled what was going on. And when we say saved a lot of lives, sometimes it's a stretch. But the reality is, if you have, for example, 100 Americans whose lives are at least theoretically in peril, and none of them die, and we safely extract them, it's not really that much of a stretch. So this movie builds toward that real-life historical event. And I remember when I watched the movie for the first time in 1987, whatever it was, I didn't know the real history. Nowadays, it's easy enough on our phones. Somebody, let's say, stumbling onto this movie for the first time on TV. Oh, that's that Clint Eastwood guy. I watched, Gran Torino, whatever it might be. And you realize, oh, wait a minute. So this movie, although the character of Thomas Highway is entirely fictional, none of the people in the movie are real people. This really happened. This incursion by the Marines into Grenada really happened and saved a lot of lives. In Clint's career, this is the most decorated individual that he ever played. Like, this is not just a great soldier. This is a guy who he's only allowed to continue soldiering because he is so decorated. As Pete Mitchell in Top Gun Maverick is only still in any way able to fly an aircraft because of some of the stunts he's pulled at the right time, impress the right people, or to be more specific, Iceman, Kazansky, is how he's able to stay in. So you can fuck up a lot, different levels of fuck ups, because Pete Mitchell is not a washout. He's just somebody that doesn't listen to orders very well. He hears them. He's going to do his own thing. He's a maverick. Again, the name, it's kind of hitting you over the head. Gunnery Sergeant Tom Highway leads the successful incursion into Grenada. I just can't believe that Grenada is now like a tropical paradise and that it's a tourist attraction. That's one of the most amazing plot twists in real life, that Grenada is a tourist attraction. I remember a number of years ago, somebody was telling me they were going away. We're going somewhere warm. Where are you going? Going to Grenada. What do you mean you're going to Grenada? There are military installations in? Yeah, not really. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Now, there was some Oscar buzz for Clint for this film. And there were other movies of the 80s where the studio, in this case Warner, because remember, Malpaso Productions, Clint's production company, he made almost every one of those movies. Now, there were some that were co-productions with Paramount, stuff like that. But Warner Brothers was the parent company, the WB. And there were other movies in the 80s, such as Tightrope from 2 years earlier. I might have to do an episode on that one. That's definitely a best movie you've never seen. But there were movies in the 80s where Clint's performance was good enough and had gotten enough acclaim from mainstream critics. There were critics saying, Clint's turn as Tom Highway, this is the best performance of his career. He's never been better. And it's one of the best movies he's been in. Forget that he directed. One of his best movies, period. So there was talk in '84 that Clint might get a Best Actor nomination for Tightrope. In that movie, he plays a New Orleans police officer who, this is not Dirty Harry. This is a guy who has like weird sexual kinks. Clint playing vulnerability, which you wouldn't have necessarily expected. He's a father. His daughter Allison plays his daughter in the film. Heartbreak Ridge, though, I actually think he gives a better performance in Heartbreak Ridge because, yes, you get the gruffness. You get the fact that he's presented as, well, he can outfight any man alive. You get in his face, he's going to blast you into the ground. And there's a memorable scene where he takes on like a 6'4", 280-pound, 4% body fat guy named Swede, and in less than 15 seconds completely neutralizes the guy. Well, the guy, he's a soldier, and he turns the guy into a great soldier. So there are a lot of those kinds of, if you want to call it, character growth. But you get enough from Clint through his relationship with Aggie. That's the Marsha Mason character. You get enough of his character and where he has been, where he thinks he's going to go, and where he might end up. And mild spoiler, the movie ends up. It ends more up than you think, because there's a version of this kind of story, guy who's outmoded, coming to the end of his career, he'll somehow die heroically, and that'll be the end of the movie. And Clint, in the 70s, he didn't always succeed. I won't spoil any movies in which he dies, but he didn't always succeed the way that you expect, and the way that we now expect watching a mainstream Hollywood film with someone like Clint Eastwood. You expect that he's going to triumph. I want to point out on the same front, just for reference, in the movie Absolute Power, which was made a little over a decade after Heartbreak Ridge, probably have to do an episode on that movie. Clint plays a jewel thief. He should be the bad guy, but he's not the bad guy because he's he's trying to retire from being a jewel thief, but he's a jewel thief with a heart of gold. He's not stealing the jewels to fence them to make money. He's got enough money from prior heists. He just does it to see that he can do it. He's testing himself. It's like Thomas Crown affair. Thomas Crown is one of the richest men in New York. He doesn't need the money. He wants to see, can I pull off a heist and not get caught? But Absolute Power, in the book, the character that Clint plays in the movie, Luther Whitney, commits a crime, gets caught, and ends up dying in prison. In the movie, Luther Whitney, spoiler alert, is still around in the third act. In the book, he is gone by the middle of Act 2. So, the idea is that Clint was not just going to randomly bump off one of his characters without it really making an awful lot of sense. And some of you who have seen Clint's later work know that he's not afraid to do what I just said. And not in a way to just pull it to heartstrings, but that makes sense for the story. So So Clint ended up not getting a Best Actor nomination for Heartbreak Ridge, but the film was a substantial box office hit. And really, it was the last hit that Clint would have for 6 years until the success of Unforgiven. As I talked about, his career dipped after Heartbreak Ridge and after he didn't resign. After he served his 2-year term as mayor of Carmel, California. He came back with a number of movies which were good, such as Bird with Forrest Whitaker about Charlie Parker, and White Hunter, Black Heart, where he plays an interpretation of the great filmmaker John Huston, literally during the making of The African Queen with Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. But it wasn't really until Unforgiven that Clint, in his early 60s, got back onto the A-list. But Heartbreak Ridge is an incredibly entertaining film, as I've said, and even with chunks of the film basically are Tom Highway beating the shit out of somebody, there are moments where you sense Clint pulling back and not doing what we expect because he didn't want to pander to the audience. He did not want to just do fan service because there are two characters. This is going to be a bit of a spoiler. There are two antagonistic characters in this film that we fully expect that Tom Highway is going to light the fuck up. And one of them he doesn't at all, and the other one he simply outsmarts and outmaneuvers. And it's to the film's credit, and the film is better because it didn't stoop to just giving us what we wanted to see all the time. Because we get an awful lot of rah-rah, crowd-pleasing moments. And we get a lot of Clint with that kind of rueful smile, and also the smile of a job well done. And we get that there was method to this guy's madness. He's not simply an asshole who's fucking shit up. This is a great soldier, a man who has given everything he had to the service, and he wants people following in his path to take it as seriously as he did. And if their personal lives aren't shambling wrecks, well, so much the better. Then they'll probably be even better soldiers than I was. Heartbreak Ridge, cross-referenced, cross-indexed, a guilty pleasure movie, which I would rate as a 3.5 star out of 4 film. But when you watch it, if you haven't and you watch it, you'll understand. There is enough of that kind of guilty pleasure stuff where it has a very high rewatchability factor. Certainly, of any movie that deals with war in any context, most rewatchable, easily. And if you haven't seen it, if you're under 40, it's unlikely you've seen this movie. And under 30, I would say, even if you're a big movie fan, you have not seen this movie. Unless you're a Clint Eastwood completist, which if you're under 30 is also very unlikely. Heartbreak Ridge, directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood, Marsha Mason, Everett McGill, and a fire Mario Van Peebles. The 21st entry in our continuing series, the best movie you've never seen, and I believe the 22nd or 23rd entry in our series of guilty pleasure movies. This has been episode 272 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your, well, now, Friday afternoon with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, or the other platforms, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.